Okay, let's get into this. Jade Helm 15 is kind of turning out to be one of the most bizarre kind of military exercises going on in the States now. It's not really in play at the moment in the sense of that the main drill is not being played. It's 8 weeks, but you'll only see about 5 weeks of it on the streets, so to speak. However, there's a lot of activity and stuff being moved around, so it's not really the drill going on. They're just putting everything in place, I guess. But you're seeing tanks on the street. To me, there's a little more to this Jade Helm thing than more than meets the eye. There's just too many bizarre things that are going on. Now, as a drill in itself, it's not really that out of the ordinary. What is out of the ordinary is where it's taking place. You have to understand. Same here in Canada as is just about any other country, including the United States. Soldiers typically train where they're going to fight. Okay, so when you see a military drill for martial law in your country, you should be, especially when it's the largest one since the 1950s, you should pay attention to it. You really should. The thing is when Obama did his military purge, largest military purge, I think since the 1800s, basically getting rid of anybody that probably wouldn't go along. You have to understand, a lot of that went on in other places too, such as chiefs of police, etc., appointees type stuff. Anywhere there's nobody elected, people get appointed. Up here in Canada, we don't have like elected bureaucrats; they're appointed, which is kind of dangerous when you think about it. So what you have is all these FEMA region police officers and stuff like that that are basically, uh, you know, in charge of all these states for their FEMA regions and stuff like that, and they're all kind of linked into this Jade Helm thing as well. Now, there's also the WalMarts. The WalMarts keep coming up. Now, yeah, I may be backtracking a bit on something what I said. I said I didn't know everything going on about them, but to keep an eye on them. Now, one of the things I speculated about, and it seems like other people are kind of talking about it again. I mean, it's hard to confirm this stuff because you have to understand this is not stuff that we have access to the actual information on it, right? One thing I said is, okay, these Walmart employees get like a 5 hour notice that they're no longer employed uh, for plumbing problems in I think 5 or 7 stores now, which is kind of suspicious. Now you have to understand, I forget exactly which Walmart it is that closed down, but the property it's on is owned by Lockheed Martin. Yeah. So again, we're getting into Rothschildism already. When we look at the Jade Helm 15, here's my one thing I said. I wouldn't be surprised if there were missile silos underneath these Walmarts, hiding in plain view. You know, you have to understand the amount of black budgets that the United States have. The SR-71 Blackbird, I mean, that thing was a huge black budget. And you have to understand when the SR-71 came out, it was outdated. That technology had been and gone. And that's back, with Kelly Johnson in the 1960s. So if that's what if that was obsolete when it hit, came out as a frontline stealth reconnaissance airplane, what did they have back then? So you can only imagine what they have now. Now we know about underground tunnels. We know about Cheyenne Mountain and the return to Cheyenne Mountain. Again, all these bizarre things an individual thing on themselves means nothing. But when you look at all the things going on, NORAD moving back into Cheyenne Mountain, they moved out of there because they said, well, it's obsolete because it'd be targeted by nukes right away. But then they're moving back in because it's EMP proof. So, which is it, right? So there's something else going on. And then we also know about, I forget the proper name of the tunnels. I can't remember if they're in Virginia or whatever, but it's like 1,400 miles of underground tunnels. So these type of things get built without people knowing about it, right? So is it really implausible to think that there could be underground tunnels going from one Walmart to a next, as other people are kind of suggesting? Probably not. But why pick a Walmart? Well, again, we get back to this corporation stuff. Remember, every country right now is under a huge form of fascism if they're not in a war. Uh, so when you look at the top 85 most richest people, the owner of Walmart, she's in there, and I think she's in like the top 10. Okay, so you don't get that rich without buddyism. You know what I mean? Like that basically, when you have state and business into bed together, you have fascism. Okay. Now, with that said, Walmart has kind of some strange things going about it, on the upper echelons, so to speak, to begin with. But the average person is going to walk into a Walmart, buy what they need. It's nothing more than a store to them. Which could you not pick a better place to put a missile silo directly underneath a Walmart? That makes sense to me. I'm not saying there is missile silos under the Walmarts, but it would make sense. Uh, but it still doesn't explain how. Again, plumbing problems out of nowhere that they won't discuss. Uh, Again, and some people have made the suggestion that these are the WalMarts where people have been striking for $15 an hour, and that it's just kind of well, you bring in a union, we're going to close the place down, kind of thing. Yeah, but you couldn't do it that way. You still couldn't do it that way. You'd still have to give people notice if it was for plumbing problems. You'd have to give them way in advance notice. It'd be different if the CDC came in and said, "Hey, we're closing this down because there's a major health hazard and whatever." But even at that, they would come out and tell you. It's the secrecy around it that really gets people. And apparently, in some of these WalMarts, there's like 30 big shipping containers outside one of the WalMarts. And some people speculated that what they're going to do is that's how they're going to get rid of people's vehicles or something like that. That's a possibility, sure. But again, you go to the average Walmart, there's more than 30 trucks worth of merchandise in there. Point is why are they taking out the merchandise? Just the shelving is probably 10 shipping containers alone. So why would they be taking that out? If it's plumbing problems, okay, you're still not going to have to, even if you have to rip up the floor, you're still not going to have to empty the entire store. You just I've done store renovations before. You just move things from one side of the store to the other. That's all you do. You'd be surprised how much product is in the store when renovations are going on. Why? Because even though it's not set up, it's like just bring it here now. We'll deal with it. It's just crates and carts and shelving all over the place, and it's just a total disaster. But it's an organized chaos, and it all fits in the store. That's what forklifts are for. So it makes no sense to take the products outside of the stores, let alone 30 shipping containers. So what's the shipping containers about? I don't know. Now, blocking out the windows, I've already addressed that one. Every store grand opening for the company that I work for, every grand opening, they whitewash the windows. The reason why they whitewash the windows is kind of to keep the element of surprise. And plus, they don't want to see the renos. And if there is product in there, they don't want people looking in, while the store is not set up, that type of thing. It's just the way things are done. So, again, some of it, you got to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. I'm not saying there's nothing suspicious going on. But on the other hand, too, it's something to keep an eye on. Now, that said, the exercise, some people are also speculating that this exercise is actually going into its final phase, that it's been in place since 2001, maybe doubling off the Patriot Act or whatever, and that this is actually not a start of something, but the end of something, which could coincide, if you want to take we're going to go down the rabbit hole here anyway. If you want to go from the religious side, the four tetrans, the four blood moons, we're going to be approaching the four blood moons. The fourth one, I believe, in August or September. Don't quote me on the date, or October, somewhere around that time. Which a lot of stuff is speculated to happen at that time. Could be a huge financial crash and market correction at that time, which, again, when everybody loses their retirement overnight type of thing, and their bank accounts are seized, and there's a run on the banks, and a bank holiday, yeah, you're going to have martial law. You're going to have martial law. The people in Cyprus handled it quite well. I don't think the Americans are going to handle it well. I don't even think us Canadians are going to handle it well. Again, when you completely shake a person's reality, you're shaking the matrix of somebody that knows meat and potato and apple pie all their life, and all of a sudden you're taking them away and saying you don't even get rice grains. I mean, I don't know if that made sense to you or not, but you get the idea. You're shaking people's reality, and people fear the unknown, hence violent reaction, hence why you're going to have martial law. Now, if it's the final phase of something, there's two speculations I've heard on this as well, that the final phase is the rounding up of not so much political dissidents. Political dissidents are not really a problem for if we're talking martial law, you can protest all you want. You're just not going to be taking on the tanks. They're not worried about those guys. The guys they're worried about is, militia members. Not so much the members, but the leaders. It's always the top of the food chain that they're going after. They don't care about the communist student, black bloc protester who throws Molotov cocktails, because you're going to know where to find them all the time. They're going to be gathered in big crowds around people in a city somewhere. They don't really hide. They come out. It's actually a form of control. crowds like Occupy and stuff is actually a form of control. Why? Because you know they're going to be within this 10 block radius. You don't have to worry about them. It's the guys that have the SEAL, Navy SEAL training, the ex-law enforcement. I think they actually, and I'm not trying to offend any military guys out there, but I think the ex-law enforcement guys are going to be the worst for the DHS and the CIA and the FBI and pick the alphabet organization. I think these guys are going to be the worst for them. Why? Because they don't fight the same way Marines do, and Army and Rangers and Green Berets and etc. etc. When we're talking arm, we're talking storming the castle, take it down that way. Don't mean those guys won't be extremely dangerous, but these law enforcement guys, they know exactly who to go after. Why? Because they've worked with these guys. Where the military guys, they came back from someplace. Okay, they'll have an idea of who to go after, but it's a different game. But the law enforcement guys, they're going to know the governors, they're going to know they're going to know all the players, and they're going to know all the routes, they're going to know all the what the tactics are. So with the military, they'll know military tactics. But when we're talking law enforcement, these guys, they're going to know the cities. They're just going to have that little extra kind of home advantage, if that makes sense to you. And why that's going to be so dangerous for the DHS and stuff like that is because also the way law enforcement fights. They don't, other than the SWAT team guys, they don't typically try to storm the castle. They either hold ground or fight in a retreat, if that makes sense to you. Meaning preserve life at all cost. Take a couple of shots, get out of dodge, which means hit and run tactics. And I think that's what the DHS is terrified of, is the hit and run tactics. We're talking German snipers, World War II type of tactics, you know what I mean, where they hit you, it's a war of attrition. It'll be, so they know they can't take on, the hunters. Just some of the numbers I've been hearing from some of the vets out there is like, you got, just in hunters, you got 10, 20 million people right there, just gun owners. You got 150 million gun owners in the States. It's like half the population. So you got that. Vets, you're talking about minimum 4 million to 8 million. So no matter what, the current, if you add up all law enforcement, military, sheriffs, everything currently in play, which the thing is a lot of the sheriffs, I believe, are kind of they're constitutionalists. So this is what I'm thinking the DHS is getting ready to take on, is the leaders of the Constitution-oriented. I'm not even talking Oath Keepers. I'm talking, they'll be targeted too, but I'm talking more like, current Joe Arpaio? Constitutional sheriffs like that, but the king dogs. We've already heard sheriffs saying, if the Fed comes in, we're going to protect our citizens. You've seen this like in the Ukraine, for example. I like to use the Ukraine for an example because it's such a good example. Many local law enforcement, stepped up to the plate to, they're on the side of the people. Most of them got killed, So again, they don't have to take out every sheriff. They have to take out the ones that are leaders. So that's what I think these kind of exercises are kind of more for. The next thing that I've heard is that it's the opposite, that it's not really for martial law, it's for liberation after they let the economy completely collapse, which a lot of people out there say, no, it's going to collapse by this date and time. And this is the part they don't get. The system is rigged. Okay, let me repeat that and just let it really sink into you, because this is what guys like Peter Schiff don't get, even Greg Hunter. I like these guys a lot, but they don't get it. The only guy that I think that gets it is Harry Dent. He says it best. He's like, the system is rigged. He says, and it's all systems. Whether it's in China, he says, he goes, they're just as bad off as the States, and it's true. The systems are rigged, and that's the whole point. This system's rigged. The stock market's rigged. There is no free market anywhere. It's all rigged, and because that is rigged, it means a societal or an economic collapse that happened in 2008. Okay, and right now they got some scapegoat guy that said scammed millions and billions of dollars as a day trader and caused a flash crash. That's possibly true. Again, the system is rigged. It doesn't mean there's just one person rigging it. You know what I mean? The guys that are in the know would know that, hey, I can get away with this, because if I don't, I'm going to rat you out. And that's why I think all these elite bankers you've been seeing getting killed over the last past year has been kind of with bizarre suicides and stuff like that, and stuff I told people to watch out for. Politicians dropping dead, bankers dropping dead, that type of thing. And we're even seeing, like in the Ukraine right now, it's like something like 11 politicians mysteriously committed suicide with help, so to speak. Sorry, in the last past month. But that has more to do with the geopolitics there than anything. And here's where it gets twisted, is that because the system is so rigged, this is so important to understand, that I don't think we're going to see a 1929 stock market crash. I think we're just going to see the crash that we've been living through, just like kind of a soft landing, kind of work your way to gradual poor, work your way down to a third world country. That's what's happening, and people are starting to notice. They know something's wrong. It's like the frog in a pan kind of scenario, where you turn the heat on right away with a frog in a pot of water. The frog will just jump out because you'll feel the heat right away. But you turn it on slow, he'll boil to death slowly and not realize it. And that's what they're trying to do, is so that the bankers don't get. And you have to understand, if the bank, whatever the bankers get blamed for, so do the politician. Why? We go back full circle. Fascism. Corporate and state in bed together. They're all on the same hook. So there's only a couple of ways they can hide this. If they, on one side, if they do a crash happens, they lock down the society and in martial law, and they round up people. People end up in the FEMA camps, and we've seen so much activity of people being hired for these positions in internment camps and stuff like that. I mean, it is getting pretty scary out there. See, unlike the Third Reich, what they did, okay, they didn't build the stuff right away either. It was gradual as well. But they went at it a lot faster. This plan, if it's been in place since 2001, think of the 700, 800 to 1,000 FEMA camps with all these big, 4 or 5 man body coffins there that are all over the place. Think about that. Now, the thing is with all those things in play, execution by guillotine, Obama did approve that, believe it or not. Now, the guillotines, the FEMA guillotines, I think there was only like 4 of them that were on a truck somewhere, so it wasn't tens of thousands. I may have covered it before, and I was going by information. Like anything, you can't confirm it, so you can only look out for it. So if you see it, then you can say, okay, yeah, there it is. But just things to be aware of. So 4 guillotines is not really what you need to be concerned about. It's the fact that death by guillotine is now legal. That's what And I don't like death by guillotine. It's a pain in the neck. Anyway, bad joke. So anyway, that going on, so that's kind of one kind of, everybody has a different take on this. Now there's other guys out there saying, look, I'm ex-military, this is nothing to see here, don't worry about it, these guys are on your side. But then again, there's another spin on this. The way they're lining up the states, it almost kind of resembles the Middle East, meaning massive war in the Middle East. Now, with the U.S., I think it's U.S. Donald Cook, not Donald Cook, it's the aircraft carrier. Anyway, it heads over to Iran. They've been steaming over there for a while now. But anyway, a carrier group goes into Iran to last week or early this week, from the making of this video, to go and kind of stop Iranian ships, which they suspect has weapons for the Houthis that are fighting the Saudis right now. And that type of thing. Okay, so you have that going on in the Middle East. Now you have to understand, this whole uprising between Saudi Arabia and Iran is basically the stepping stone to get into a war with Iran, so that they could then overtake Iran and then be on China's doorstep. It has nothing to do with the Middle East. I mean, Iran hasn't attacked anybody in 200 years. Okay. Yes, they organize Hezbollah, but is the Mossad any better? I mean, the Mossad, Israel basically treats ISIS fighters as, we're just going to call them Free Syrian rebels, Free Syrian army when they come across our border. So you have to understand, Saudi Arabia and Israel are the 2 biggest terrorist organizations supporters in the Middle East. Almost all the destabilization there is because of that. Iran is on the other side. Now, you have to understand, to overthrow Iran is to cut off oil supply to China, plus it allows the Americans to put missile systems on China's border, basically surround China. What they're doing in Ukraine is the same thing they want to do in Iran. Now the problem is to get in there, you need, if they can come to the aid of an ally, that would be the best, because they just can't seem to get a war with Iran started, right? So that would be the best way to do it. Is, they're attacking poor little helpless Saudi Arabia, who, basically funded all the 9/11 terrorists. but yet somehow they're an ally of the states. Yeah, I wonder about that. Again, fascism. So so the Americans will be going to kill Iranians sooner than probably later, and this Jade Helm can work for that. Like I say, it's multifaceted. It can work for so many different things. It can work to train up a proxy army. It can work for martial law. It can work in case there would be Third World War breakout. Everything is just magically in place where it needs to be should something happen. If an economic collapse happens, Jade Helm is already in play. Now the thing is to me, I'm thinking because of what's going on with the Russians. Uh, that probably has something to do with it too, because the Russians have been building up, in South America. You know, Putin's attitude and the Russian Federation attitude is basically, if you destabilize our border and all our allies, we can destabilize your borders. Meaning, you're going to see, Venezuela get some Topo M's at some point, and those are basically mobile missile launchers that fire nukes. Uh, Cuba, you think Obama's heart changed on Cuba? No, it's because the Russians have paid off the Cuban debt and they're putting in bases there. In other words, we're in October Crisis 2.0. Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0. Okay, is taking place now. That's why the Cubans have, they're trying to make concessions with Cuba. It's not going to work though. Venezuela, same problem. Venezuela, they're trying to do a U.S. coup in Venezuela for regime change, and it's not going according to plan, and now the Venezuelans are moving closer to Russia. So now you have Cuba, pro-Russia, not necessarily pro-Russia, but going to be Russia-friendly. We have Venezuela, again, turning way more pro-Russian. We have Argentina turning pro-Russian. The list goes on and on and on. And arms are going from, for example, with Argentina, you have the British racing back to the Falklands right now because basically Russia and Argentina, which Argentina and the Argentinian government has pretty much told the IMF to go hump a hat, like last year, about how they're going to work their economy. Now, it doesn't mean Argentina has not had, I mean, they collapse like every 2 years type of thing economically, but right now Russia, to get around sanctions, said, hey, you give us food, we'll give you fighter jets. Sure, they're probably going to get rusted out MiG-21s, but still, they might get a few. I think Venezuela's taking on a couple of Su-24s, getting a little bit more modernized. This could be a problem. Plus, now you have landing ports for Russia. So again, this is something to consider. Now, if it's a lockdown for martial law, for whatever the crisis is going to be, remember there's still those 5 or 6 missing nuclear B-61 nukes from Dyess Air Force Base. Nobody knows where those things are. Okay, you got to keep them. You got to kind of keep a memory on these things. So if a nuke goes off in the States, they would probably try to blame Russia, China, or Iran. I don't think it would go Russia and China right away, but Iran would be. Again, look, MH17 when it got shot down over the Ukraine, 15 minutes later, CNN is saying Russia did it. How would they know? The investigation isn't even over yet, and it's like a year later. You know what I mean? So you could see the propaganda is that both sides of the aisle in Washington want to go to war with Russia. It doesn't matter because they're not going to fight it. You are, they're willing to let you die for that and your family members. And the idea is that if they can depopulate the world with some of their crazy programs that they have. Look, Latimer Land wrote in his memoirs that he was ecstatic when 20 million people starved to death in Soviet Russia because at least then there wasn't all these useless eaters around. They could restart the economy, etc., etc. That's how these people think. And people, yeah, but that was back then. People, we're much more modernized society now. Okay, if you look at human history in its entirety, no, we're not better than the people back then. We're still doing the same things. We have, I guess classism would be the best way to say it. You have a libertine society that has, wants rules for everybody else, but the rules never apply to them. Can you not say that's modern day politicians? They can get away with just about anything, and they have. So you don't think you're going to get away with this? Well, it depends on the masses, or not on the masses, but on the minority. The minorities, again, sheriffs, constitutional sheriffs, militia groups, ex-law enforcement, ex-military are the ones that are, because these are the guys putting it into play. And you see now, even you're seeing on daily news, pretty much police brutality. Now, is it because the mainstream media cares about it? Or is it because they're trying for something else? And this is what I said Ferguson was all about. This is what I said you know, Trayvon Martin, all those things. When you put it together, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get the people to hate the police. So what's that going to do? Is it going to be just a big clash everywhere? No. Think about it. If you're not appreciated, you leave, don't you? You just, hey, I'm out of here. Fine, screw you. You know, they want the regular domestic police forces to go on a nationwide strike. Now you have a reason to implement martial law. And you can best do that by demonizing every cop on the actions of one or two. And I'm not saying police brutality doesn't exist. It certainly does. But the idea that it's all of them, no, no. And the thing is you even have to question some of these, shootings and stuff like that. That, is it really, the shooting itself might happen, but is it not staged in some sort of way? I mean, who knows? I mean, if you wanted to implement martial law, it'd be a perfect psyop. You know what I mean? But then again, they've also changed the standards for police officers to basically they've lowered the standards. Same with the military. They've lowered the standard on that too. Why? Because people aren't signing up. Why? Because they figured it out. It's all corrupt. You go to fight in a war that's basically for bankers. You basically go rob this country and that country for the resources in the name of the women and children and everything like that, but you end up killing more of them than you save. And it's just war after war after war. People are catching on. It's a scam. So the best way to do it is get people that just want to join. There are people, how's it put? And I'm not trying to bash law enforcement, military on this, because I know the 99% of them are good. But there are people that join, to, serve and protect, and there are cops that join to shoot people. I mean, hey, if you wanted to be a serial killer or a psychopath in that kind of thing, and you wanted to kill people, there's two occupations that can make it legal for you. You know what I mean? If you know what you're doing. Now, planting evidence, etc., etc. Now, again, I'm not demonizing all the police, but you have to understand the standards have changed. They got guys now that they don't care but to follow orders. If they say round them up, they'll do it. And you don't think it'll happen here? I mean, hey, look, every country where they had jackboot thugs go out and round people up, it was always legal. And I can't stress that enough. This idea, well, that would never happen here because this is a nice place. You hear that in history so many places and so many times. I mean, do you think the people that willingly got onto the trains to Auschwitz really thought they were going to be harmed? I don't think they would have gotten on the trains if they thought so. Because it was inimaginable. It wasn't something I could imagine, right? We're just passing, the 100-year anniversary of the Armenian genocide. Think about it. Everything Adolf Hitler, everything Latimer Moland did, everything Joseph Stalin did, Pol Pot, Tojo, Gingrich Yagoda, just pick one of these tyrants out of history. Every single thing they did was legal. Okay, so that's something you have to consider. Everything about Jade Helm, okay, although people argue it's unconstitutional in the States, you have to understand the Constitution's been pretty much wiped away with in the States. It's just people haven't realized it yet. Everything that they're doing is legal. They've okay, this used to be illegal, now we make it legal. Henry Kissinger, illegal we do right away, unconstitutional takes a little longer. Well, you've now got military on the streets. And that's in all countries. So, you wonder how South American countries end up with military, where the police and the military are the same thing and they're dictators. It's because of stuff like this, So, locking down the society now, there is another turn and spin on this that could possibly, hopefully, I would hope this is the actual right one. And something I said, at some point you are either going to see a U.S. military coup in the States, just because the guys that are in the know, they're training for this stuff. They might not tell these guys exactly what they're training for, but you're going to sense it. You're going to feel it. Okay, well, you're training me to shoot pregnant women and children, with guns on. If you haven't seen the no hesitation targets, just punch in pregnant lady, no hesitation target. It'll turn your stomach. It's just, when you realize that, and when the argument comes up, well, you have to be ready for anything as an officer of the law. Please, come on. Yes. Is it possible that a pregnant lady in a nursery could shoot at you as an officer of the law? Yes. But should it be something that you should be training for real, live pictures of a real, a real pregnant lady? Should you be shooting at that? I think not. It should make a zombie version of it. You know what I'm saying? Come on, have some, but if you hesitate, you'll die. Again, women, children, stuff like that. Like you can't. You could try to justify it as that if you're a law enforcement officer, but while you're sitting there squeezing the trigger, saying, "Why is the emphasis on women, children, elderly, and every uh, particularly all Caucasian?" you know, like why are we focusing on this when we should be shooting at like the guy with the bad 1970s mullet, and the wife beater, that type of thing, with the hatchet in his hand. Okay, yeah, train on that, sure, you know. Uh, but the other one, it's like, what's next? Kittens and puppy dogs? Like, I mean, really, like it's, you know. But if you're an officer or a military guy and you're training on this, like for example, the IRS. Why does the IRS need 7,000 M16s? Why would they need that? Why would some school boards need ammunition and stuff like that? I mean, the DHS has been buying stuff, and I get how they do it. Okay, well, we're over our budget, so we'll put it on their budget, that type of thing. And I get that, but it's still, why are they doing it? I mean, the DHS just bought, after buying 7 billion rounds the past couple of years, enough to find a 27-year war in Iraq. They've now bought another 62 million, and all basically meant basically hunting rounds. They're your defense rounds, hunting rounds, not military rounds, not training rounds, cheap training rounds, but expensive hollow points and stuff like that. Expanding rounds, not penetrating rounds. So they're not getting ready to shoot people in body armor. They're getting ready to shoot soft tissue. And I don't think you're going deer hunting. You know what I'm saying? So that's a thing to keep an eye on. But one of the speculations came from one of the LaRouche Pack guys, Harvey. Uh, I can't remember the last name, but anyway, he said that actually it's the reset. If the reset comes, and again, we won't know until we know, right? Um, and he said basically that these guys are actually going to take over the system and keep order, but when everything collapses, they're going to be in play to keep order everywhere. Um, and then when they do, they're going to basically hopefully hang out the elites to apparently there are elites out there that are trying to fight what we call the New World Order or Illuminati or whatever. I just call them corrupt people. They're thugs, oligarchs, cartels. Yeah, some of them are cultists. Yes, the Zionist faction is in there for sure, but there's just plain old greedy criminal. And people can grasp the idea of an axe murderer or the psychopaths, strangler type of person, or a bank robber or a drug dealer. They can grasp the idea of corrupt politicians, but they can't grasp the idea of genocidal maniac. But if you just look at the Congress, both sides, all they talk about is war, how to go to war with another country. Uh, the patients are running the asylum there. They're all lunatics. And the amount of stuff, I mean, Hillary Clinton again, oh, geez, can't even get me started on her. Don't even get me started there. But again, it just one scam after another, and just brushes it off like, oh, well, whatever. Well, people are kind of saying, yeah, but if that was me, I mean, I steal a candy bar, I go to jail for 10 years. You know what I mean? For a freaking candy bar. But these people steal billions, they manipulate the system, and nothing. Again, the people that are paid to protect this system eventually are going to turn on it. Why? Because it's so corrupt. The problem I have with that, well, I'm kind of hoping that's what it is. Problem is that means chances are, if there is ever a military coup in the United States, which is not as impossible as you think it is, the idea is that who's going to be the guy in charge? Is he going to be a libertarian or an authoritarian? And when we look at South American countries particularly, or African countries, when military dictators take over, it usually never ever goes well. That said, the States is a bit of an anomaly in the world because of how it came to be, in 1776 and that revolution. But the thing is that times have changed since then. Men were much more libertarian back then. The liberals of the day were actually not what we call liberals today. Liberals today are basically progressives. Progressives today are actually communists and authoritarian. And the thing is I don't know if our societies are so divided now, particularly in the United States, that it's hard to say which faction would be fighting which faction. I mean, obviously the race war would go on. You'll have the blacks and the Latinos fighting, and then both of them fighting the whites, that type of thing. I could see that happening. But amongst the I guess patriot groups or whatever, would there be brawls between them? Most likely, yeah, because everything becomes tribal at that point. Why? There's no leader at the ship, helm of the ship, right? So this is where I think Jade Helm kind of comes in, because they know they can't take on the gun owners and stuff like that, but what they can do is kind of keep certain areas semi-safe. The cities, I think, are going to burn anyway. I mean, the amount of protests that are going on now, and the size of protests that are going on now worldwide for, we have a very hypersensitive population right now for several reasons. Remember, the students are the canaries in the coal mine. They're always the first to react because, again, idle hands make for devil's work, so to speak. When you have all this youth unemployment, they're going to take to the streets. That's what's happened in Greece, Spain, Italy, Tunisia. Pick a country. Pick a country that the youth isn't rising up. But the thing is it's not the youth that usually makes the big change. It's when it goes into the system where the system starts failing. And again, soldiers I think are, and don't take this the wrong way if you're military listening to this, or law enforcement, but soldiers and cops are only as loyal as their paychecks. If you're going to say I got to put my life on the line and then not pay me for it. Now, under the NDRP, if you are an American, I can't stress this enough, you need to read the NDRP, because that is basically the biggest resource grab in history, and it basically is enacted martial law. The marching orders just haven't been given yet, or maybe they have, and the Jade Helm is what we're going to be seeing. The other thing is that it also allows the government to basically commandeer any resource, whether it's your property, personal belongings, your labor, whatever, without compensation. And this also includes civilians, meaning slave camps, labor camps, and law enforcement, military, whatever, government employees. They also have to, work whether they get paid or not. So, yeah, I can only see that kind of going so far. You'll have your few loyalists up at the top, but I think once the masses start ditching it, that you'll have kind of like what happened in Iraq, where the disbanding of the Republican Guard led to such sectarian violence. This again, it all becomes tribal. Now, in the States, it's a little different the way the tribes will be worked out, but it will be tribal. Basically, you'll have this group with that group, and and people will establish their lines. Now, the loyalty of the U.S. military, again, I don't think they're as loyal as you would think. Look at the Ukraine again. We're going to go back to the Ukraine. Look at them; they're losing control of their military, and because times are hard in Ukraine right now. You got a proxy war going on there between Russia and the United States, and it's not going well. And you've got people that aren't getting paid, so you have all these miners that are striking. At Kiev now. Granted, yes, the Ukraine is nowhere near the size of the States, and nowhere near as industrialized or nowhere near as advanced as the States, city-wise, cities and stuff like that. But it doesn't really matter. The reaction is the same. When people lose everything, they lose it. And when they start blaming people, this is where I think the Jade Helm kind of comes in. Now, if they're on the good side, they'll round up these douchebags that put us in this problematic place in the first place. Now, the thing is one of the speculations was that, and if it is this, it's actually a good thing, that what they're going to do is basically the United States is going to declare bankruptcy, okay, which collapses the world. It becomes a genocide overnight, just the amount of people starving to death in third world countries, and in the United States, and in pick a country. It's because it's the, right now the United States is in a really bad situation. $18 trillion deficit, $240 trillion that they know of in unguaranteed liability funds or whatever, retirement, etc., etc. And the thing is what the idea is, if they let it collapse and go insolvent, it collapses the IMF and all those douchebag Rothschild organizations overnight, and then they just bring everybody home. Bring all the troops home. That means also too, the day that happens, Russia rolls into the Ukraine, Iran wipes out Saudi Arabia, India, Pakistan. I'll probably get into it. It will destabilize the world. Why? Because when the United States is no longer the police of the world, well, right now they're kind of the only ones really policing the world. So you get the idea. It's going to be a hell of a party, right? But they bring everything back. The unrest will be here as well. So again, if this Harvey guy, I can never think of his last name, but he's one of the LaRouche Pack guys, and he said, look, he says the good news, he says, is that there is oligarchs, or not oligarchs, but like world elites that are trying to fight all the progressivism and whatever you want to call it, Agenda 21 stuff that that's going on. They're fighting. It's just that it's not an easy fight, right? Again, when the whole system has been set up to do exactly to be where we're at, you have to understand this is the long con. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But again, keep an eye on these Walmarts. I still don't know what to make of them. Maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing. But it does seem to be coming more of a yeah, there's something going on more than meets the eye here. Again, if it was plumbing, they would tell you exactly what the problem was. And you would have known about it for like probably 3 months on end. It's like, oh yeah, they got to rip all that out. And if it was a store, they wouldn't do them all in one shot. They would say, okay, well, it's any store or chain I've ever worked for. Whenever they renovate a store, they close one down. They might do like say 3 store renovations in a year, but they're not gonna, they're gonna prepare their people well for those renovations. In fact, usually the people that work there end up doing the renovations. That type of thing, depending on unless it's expertise are needed or whatever. So, with that said, again, 5 hours notice, you have no job now. Okay, sure, if you could take it from the angle of that they're just getting rid of the troublemakers that are trying to strike for $15 an hour, which is a lunatic thing to do anyway. Yeah, Walmart could probably pay you $15 an hour, sure, but thing is that the second that becomes minimum wage, you get replaced by robots. So 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, buying time, whatever. But anyway, I get the idea because people are getting desperate because again, we have a service sector economy and just people can't get ahead, and they're gonna lash out one way or another. Most people have no idea what's going on. That there is bad things, bad people at play that want bad things to happen to us. But I don't think I don't think they can carry it out. Number one, the military is well as armed as it is. When you've had all these vets, they know how to beat the things that they flew. They know how to beat the tanks. They know how to beat and you think it's all high tech stuff to beat, like drones and cameras and stuff like that. But it isn't as high tech as you think. Like it works well if it's pointed in the right direction. Look, if it worked so well, we wouldn't have seen 2 hostages killed by U.S. drones in the past 24 hours from the making of this video. If it worked that well, they would have known. Like Hollywood makes it look like they see through the walls and stuff like. Yes, FLIR systems and thermal imaging and stuff like that does work quite well, but it has its limitations too. Just because you can see something, doesn't necessarily mean you know what you're looking at. The other thing too is they forgot to mention that one of the guys killed was an aid worker, sure, but the other guy, the one that they're focusing on, but the other guy was actually a Mossad agent. Yeah, again, just thought I'd throw that in there. So anyway, I guess I'm gonna leave it at about that. So I'm watching the Jade Helm thing. I still don't know exactly what to make of it, but the thing is it can work for so many different things. To train up a foreign military for insurgency in other countries, which plays out, would work for the Middle East. It would be perfectly set up if there were to be a Third World War kick in. They would be already in place. They could control the population. If there were to be a major catastrophe, again, dirty bomb go off, whatever, whoever they're going to blame that on, I don't know, but it's just a matter of time for this stuff. Again, at this point, nobody can trust the government, and it's not even a matter of, well, it's all these conspiracy theorists that's making it hard for us to govern, like John Kerry says. No, lying makes it, the internet makes it hard for people to lie, because you can catch them on stuff. So anyway, as far as tunnels underneath the Walmarts, I don't know. To me, it makes sense to a point, but it doesn't. Are the Walmarts being turned into FEMA camps? Maybe yes, maybe no. Walmart apparently is going to be throwing out a whole bunch of food that's kind of in their dumpsters, and some people say they're setting it up like a rat trap to catch people. I don't know. To me, that doesn't really make, if anything they're going to do, it has to serve a purpose. To catch people, okay, great, yeah, but what are you catching them for? Just to catch people in the masses is really pointless. Like, there's no point in that, because what do you do when you get all these people? And this is something a lot of people don't realize about the FEMA camps. You catch all these people, you have to feed them, you have to take care of them. Again, we think about the Nazi camps. They started off feeding the people, but then you got a couple of million of them. You know, then what do you do, right? Look at the Red Army camps, the gulags. I mean, again, you ended up there. I mean, those people. The only time they ate is when somebody died or got killed, and they, cut the, you know, yeah, basically cannibalized them. Uh, think about it. So, are they going to round up people? So, what are these camps really for? They're probably to round up a few people, but not as many as I think you. I don't think they're going to pack them. I think the only people that end up in these FEMA camps are going to be probably small numbers and probably people of, in charge of stuff, sheriffs, constitutional sheriffs, particularly militia member leaders, that type of thing. I could see those people, or extreme activists. Those type of people would probably end up there. Everybody else, they're just going to leave you to your own. That's it. Uh, red, blue, green list or whatever. Again, some people, they may start to, if they're a real threat, they're going to take you out. But again, that's if it's that side of it. But if it's on the other side of it and they're going to reset the system and bring everybody home, you have to understand the rest of the world will fall apart. Think about it, the war on drugs, just in South America alone. You pull all those agents out, okay, great. Now the cartels are just going to burn the place down, which, whatever, right? Taiwan, Taiwan, South Korea, Philippines, Vietnam. You tell the Chinese that the U.S. military is going home and they won't be back until they, rebuild their country because of an economic collapse. There will be no South Korea, there will be no Taiwan, there will be no Japan, there will be, why? Because China will pretty much conquer right down to Australia, possibly even conquering Australia at some point. Economically, they already have Australia and New Zealand, but who knows? The Chinese, if there was no checkmate for them, I'm not saying that they would win against all. If the Philippines joined up with Japan and Taiwan and South Korea, yeah, they could probably put China in their place. Problem is all these other countries mentioned don't necessarily get along with each other either. So that's where the problem is. So it's again, you just follow the history, go back a few thousand years, you find out everybody's clubbed each other over the head at some point, right? So. Ukraine, Europe, pretty much Eastern Europe becomes known as Russian Federation 2.0. An uncle of mine said, used to have a saying, yeah, Russia took a lot of countries to make that country. Again, you tell Putin, yeah, by the way, the Americans are going home. They're not going to fight for the Ukraine. Will Europe? I don't think so. Ukraine becomes Russian sovereign territory at that point. And meanwhile, in the States, again, bank runs or bank holidays, you're going to have a lot of rioting people in the streets. I think those people will be, just kind of beaten up a bit. I don't think they're going to be taken out. That said, could a civil war start? That's where Jade Helm could possibly be in play for, so that doesn't happen, which would be a good thing. Again, think of Iraq when George Bush disbanded the Republican Guard. I mean, if he would have kept the Republican Guard in place, they were going to hand over Saddam. They were going to hand him over, and they said no, disband him. And because they disbanded him, the country fell into chaos. So think about that in the States. If the military did the coup and they just got all the corrupt politicians and hang them out to dry, then you can still save the infrastructure. You can still save the people. You could still do business as normal, although there would be changes, that type of thing. So anyway, we'll have to keep an eye on this thing. It is kind of ramping up. So is this just the beginning of a phase, or is this an end of a phase? That's the things you need to be prepared for, I guess. So anyway, I guess I'll leave it at that. So if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Thank you very much to everybody who has. It really does help. Thank you very much. And it is for the channel. Rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing. And careful while you're listening to the show. You might just learn something. Have yourselves a great day, eh? G'day, hi, and welcome. Okay, let's get into this. Jade Helm 15 is kind of turning out to be one of the most bizarre kind of military exercises going on in the States now. It's not really in play at the moment, in the sense of that the main drill is not being played. It's 8 weeks, but you'll only see about 5 weeks of it on the streets, so to speak. However, there's a lot of activity and stuff being moved around, so it's not really the drill going on. They're just putting everything in place, I guess. But you're seeing tanks on the street. To me, there's a little more to this Jade Helm thing than more than meets the eye. There's just too many bizarre things that are going on. Now, as a drill in itself, it's not really that out of the ordinary. What is out of the ordinary is where it's taking place. You have to understand, same here in Canada as is just about any other country, including the United States. Soldiers typically train where they're going to fight. Okay, so when you see a military drill for martial law in your country, you should be, especially when it's the largest one since the 1950s, you should pay attention to it. You really should. The thing is when Obama did his military purge, largest military purge, I think since the 1800s, basically getting rid of anybody that probably wouldn't go along. You have to understand, a lot of that went on in other places too, such as chiefs of police, etc., appointees type stuff. Anywhere there's nobody elected, people get appointed. Up here in Canada, we don't have like elected bureaucrats; they're appointed, which is kind of dangerous when you think about it. So what you have is all these FEMA region police officers and stuff like that that are basically, uh, you know, in charge of all these states for their FEMA regions and stuff like that, and they're all kind of linked into this Jade Helm thing as well. Now, there's also the Walmarts. The Walmarts keep coming up. Now, yeah, I may be backtracking a bit on something what I said. I said I didn't know everything going on about them, but to keep an eye on them. Now, one of the things I speculated about, and it seems like other people are kind of talking about again. I mean, it's hard to confirm this stuff because you have to understand this is not stuff that we have access to the actual information on it, right? One thing I said is, okay, these Walmart employees get like a 5-hour notice that they're no longer employed for plumbing problems I think 5 or 7 stores now, which is kind of suspicious. Now you have to understand, I forget exactly which Walmart it is that closed down, but the property it's on is owned by Lockheed Martin. Yeah. So again, we're getting into Rothschildism already. When we look at the Jade Helm 15, here's my one thing I said. I wouldn't be surprised if there were missile silos underneath these Walmarts, hiding in plain view. It's you know, you have to understand the amount of black budgets that the United States have. The SR-71 Blackbird. I mean, that thing was a huge black budget. And you have to understand, when the SR-71 came out, it was outdated. That technology had been and gone. And that's back, with Kelly Johnson in the 1960s. So if that's what if that was obsolete when it came out as a frontline stealth reconnaissance airplane, what did they have back then? So you can only imagine what they have now. Now, we know about underground tunnels. We know about Cheyenne Mountain and the return to Cheyenne Mountain. Again, all these bizarre things, an individual thing on themselves means nothing. But when you look at all the things going on, NORAD moving back into Cheyenne Mountain, they moved out of there because they said, well, it's obsolete because it'd be targeted by nukes right away. But then they're moving back in because it's EMP proof. So, which is it, right? So there's something else going on. And then we also know about, I forget the proper name of the tunnels. I can't remember if they're in Virginia or whatever, but it's like 1,400 miles of underground tunnels. So these type of things get built without people knowing about it, right? So is it really implausible to think that there could be underground tunnels going from one Walmart to a next, as other people are kind of suggesting? Probably not. But why pick a Walmart? Well, again, we get back to this corporation stuff. Remember, every country right now is under a huge form of fascism if they're not in a war. So when you look at the top 85 most richest people, the owner of Walmart, she's in there. And I think she's in like the top 10. Okay, so you don't get that rich without buddyism. You know what I mean? Like that basically, when you have state and business into bed together, you have fascism. Okay. Now, with that said, Walmart has kind of some strange things going about it, on the upper echelons, so to speak, to begin with. But, the average person is going to walk into a Walmart, buy what they need. It's nothing more than a store to them. Which, could you not pick a better place to put a missile silo? Directly underneath a Walmart. That makes sense to me. I'm not saying there is missile silos under the Walmarts, but it would make sense. But it still doesn't explain how, again, plumbing problems out of nowhere that they won't discuss. Again, and some people have made the suggestion that these are the Walmarts where people have been striking for $15 an hour, and that is just kind of well, you bring in a union, we're going to close the place down, kind of thing. Yeah, but you couldn't do it that way. You still couldn't do it that way. You'd still have to give people notice if it was for plumbing problems. You'd have to give them way in advance notice. It'd be different if the CDC came in and said, "Hey, we're closing this down because it's a major health hazard and whatever." But even at that, they would come out and tell you. It's the secrecy around it that really gets people. And apparently, in some of these WalMarts, there's like 30 big shipping containers outside one of the WalMarts. And some people speculated that what they're going to do is that's how they're going to get rid of people's vehicles or something like that. That's a possibility, sure. But again, you go to the average Walmart, there's more than 30 trucks worth of merchandise in there. Point is why are they taking out the merchandise? Just the shelving is probably 10 shipping containers alone. So why would they be taking that out? If it's plumbing problems, okay, you're still not going to have to, even if you have to rip up the floor, you're still not going to have to empty the entire store. You just, I've done store renovations before. You just move things from one side of the store to the other. That's all you do. You'd be surprised how much product is in the store when renovations are going on. Why? Because even though it's not set up, it's like just bring it here now. We'll deal with it. It's just crates and carts and shelving all over the place, and it's just a total disaster. But it's an organized chaos, and it all fits in the store. That's what forklifts are for. So it makes no sense to take the products outside of the stores, let alone 30 shipping containers. So what's the shipping containers about? I don't know. Now, blocking out the windows, I've already addressed that one. Every store grand opening for the company that I work for, every grand opening, they whitewash the windows. The reason why they whitewash the windows is kind of to keep the element of surprise. And plus,